the God of the desperate, the down and out, and those that have lost their hope. He was trying to remember when was the last time he'd been able to hug his kids. He was trying to remember when was the last time anyone had touched him, as he looked at his gnarled, rotting hands, because he had leprosy. And at that time, lepers had to remain isolated. He had lost hope a long time ago, but he had heard of somebody named Jesus. He had heard that Jesus had the ability to heal people, but he wasn't quite sure about leprosy because no one had ever been healed of leprosy before. So he crept closer and closer, and he began to hear the voice of Jesus preaching. And as he got nearer, he was deciding whether to go for it or not. But then he decided, I've got nothing to lose. I'm already desperate, down and out, and I've lost my hope. So at an opportune time, and Jesus sensed that he was there and began to walk towards him. He ran out to Jesus. He knelt down, and he said, if you're willing, would you heal me? Jesus said, I am. And he touched him. For the first time in more years than he could remember, this leopard was touched. He was touched by Jesus, and he was instantly healed. And as he got to his feet and looked at his hands and began to rejoice, Jesus told him one thing. He said, go to the priests and present yourself to show them that something was done today that was never done before. And he did. And that was in Luke 5, beginning in verse 12. And now we're going to go to two other stories that are in Luke 8, the 8th chapter, beginning in verse 40. And the first one is about Jairus. He was a ruler of a synagogue. And he had one child, one daughter, who was 12 years old. And that child was deathly ill. And he didn't know what to do. But he heard of Jesus. So in desperation, he went to Jesus and said, he went to Jesus and said, if you're willing, would you heal my daughter? And Jesus said he would. Now, there's another story inset, and we'll get to that in a minute. But it ended up that one of his servants came and said, it's over. She died. Don't bother the teacher. It's already done. There is no hope left. But Jesus, he was aware of what this man had said. And he said, don't worry. I've got this covered. She's going to be okay. Then Jesus went with this man back to his dead daughter and told the crowd that had gathered there, she's only sleeping, don't worry about it. And it says that they laughed him. They laughed him to scorn. And so Jesus asked that everyone be put out except the immediate family. And then he resurrected the daughter. In the inset, there was a woman who had had an issue of blood for 12 years. She had spent her entire life savings. She'd spent everything on physicians to try to be healed of this issue of blood. And just so you're aware, just like the man with leprosy, it was in their law that they had to stay separate. She could not go and see Jesus. She was risking being stoned to death. She had given up hope. She was down and out, but she had heard of this man named Jesus that could heal. And she had also heard of a scripture in Malachi, what we call Malachi today. in the 4th chapter, the final chapter before the New Testament, where it says that he, and it calls him the Son of Righteousness, S-U-N, and I'll get to that in a minute, but he shall come with healing in his wings. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, Jesus was a rabbi, he was a teacher, and he wore a prayer shawl, and it had tassels on it. And as he would walk quickly, it would go out like wings. And as he would go by, if people just touched his wings, they were healed. And then she thought, it's worth a try. It's worth one more try. So she showed up. She got behind him, kind of like following an ambulance. You know, there's an opening there. So she got behind him, just got close enough and just grabbed onto one of the tassels for 1 second. And she was immediately healed. And Jesus said, "Who touched me?" And she was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And then the apostles, they're looking at each other and like, come on, Jesus, we're in a crowd of people and you want to know who touched you. And he said, no, you don't understand. Somebody touched me. Somebody made a connection. And power went out through me when that connection was made. And I want to know who it was. So he then saw that it was her, and she was afraid. She thought, this is it. I'm in big, big trouble. But he said, don't worry about it. I just wanted to know who it was, and I'm very happy that you were healed. Jesus is a very kind and loving being. So in Malachi 4 there, it talks about the Son of Righteousness. And what's interesting is it's translated S-U-N. Now we know from our physical sun that it gives what? It gives light, warmth, and power. Well, it wants to emphasize that Jesus does the same things. He gives us light, warmth, and power. But he also can do things our physical sun can't do. He can love us. He can show us kindness. He can show us mercy. He can give us forgiveness. What a wonderful Son of righteousness we have. Now, also in Malachi 4, and I want to mention this, it talks about an end-time work of Elijah. And you will come across people that claim that there are churches that are doing the end-time work of Elijah. But one thing I want to point out here is it talks about a turning of hearts. So if you come upon any group or organization or even a person that's claiming to be doing the work of Elijah, I want you to ask two questions. Are they turning hearts, and are they softening hearts? Because you cannot turn hearts until you soften hearts. Not everything in this life is cause and effect. Bad things happen to good people. Sometimes things just happen. The other thing I'd like to point out is that people get depressed, and we need to be aware of people that are down and out. Even King David said that there was a time where his feet were on the ledge, and I don't know whether he was speaking figuratively or not, but he was at a low time in his life. And he said, my feet had well-nigh slipped. I was on the ledge and my feet had well-nigh slipped, like I'm hoping not to do here. And, it's nice to know that if you're in a position like that, that somebody might pull you through. Somebody might pull you out of it. But what's even better is, as the people of God, that we could get to the point where we look for that in others, and that we're the ones to help pull others through, to pull others back from the ledge, to pull others back from the cliff. You know, in the book of Revelation, the 3rd chapter, it talks about the Laodiceans. And there's been a lot of talk about the Laodiceans and who they are and what they are. And usually it's the other guys, it's the other church, it's the other group that are the Laodiceans, not us, right? I mean, but one thing I want to point out here is that the Laodiceans, they don't let Jesus in. The Son of Righteousness, they're not letting him in. So what is Jesus saying? He's standing at their door. That's correct. He's standing there knocking. But they don't let him in. Why? Well, they don't need him. That's what they think. Well, you know, they're too busy doing their studies on do and don'ts. We're doing a new series now on more do and don'ts. So, you know, come back later, Jesus. We don't need you. I have for several years now been telling Jesus, Jesus, I give you permission to work in my mind, my heart, and my soul. And I highly encourage all of you to do the same thing. Connect with that Son of Righteousness like the woman with the 12 years of issue of blood did. There is power when you connect with Jesus. In 1 Peter 4:8, the Apostle Peter, who was quite started out as a fire and brimstone preacher. He was a little harsh, he was impetuous, but he softened later in life. And he got to the point where he said this, above all, love one another. If there's going to be a work to turn hearts, to soften hearts, it has to involve actually caring for other people. I'm going to share this. Julie didn't know I was going to share this, but I'm going to. We went through a really hard time back in 2015. We lost everything. The house we'd lived in for years, and it was crushing. And so that year at the Feast of Tabernacles, we didn't have the money to attend the whole feast. So we just showed up. I think it was the 3rd day we showed up. And we're sitting in the audience and noticed somebody that we knew was pointing at us, and I could see her mouthing, "There he is." And I thought, wow, you know, somebody, you know, noticed we'd showed up and they were coming over to greet us. And, well, they came over and she began by saying how offended she was that we showed up on the 3rd day, how terrible we were, and we ought to be ashamed of ourselves. And we were just so stunned, we didn't even know what to say. And the rest of that, the time that we were there for the feast, she totally shunned us. I mean, she literally, if she happened to walk by us, would turn her head, and suddenly the person behind us was the most interesting person to talk to because she ran to talk to that person to get past us. And, you know, that's not the way we should be treating people, any of us.